Welcome to this talk on child well-being and healthy development. Your presenter is Dr. Jennifer Hall-Lande, a psychologist and research associate at the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. Dr. Hall-Lande does clinical and school psychology work in child development, including early identification of autism spectrum disorder and other developmental disabilities. At the U of M, Dr. Hall-Lande conducts research in autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disability prevalence and identification of developmental delays and disabilities. She is additionally an investigator on the Autism and Developmental Disabilities Monitoring Network and has led many Learn the Signs, Act Early community outreach and research projects. Dr. Hall-Lande was selected to serve as the CDC's Act Early ambassador in Minnesota from 2014 to 2018. In this role, she promotes early developmental monitoring, early developmental screening, and early intervention with a focus on reaching underserved communities. And today's presentation is brought to you through a collaboration between LIND and Dr. Hall-Lande's Act Early work. This presentation is designed to help you learn more about how the brain grows and develops from infancy, early childhood developmental milestones, and the importance of intervening early if you notice that a milestone has not been met. You'll also be provided with resources to further your understanding of developmental screening, which can be done by parents and professionals and is different from making a diagnosis, something that can only be done by a trained medical provider. And Dr. Hall-Lande will direct you to additional web-based learning opportunities that are free and come with continuing education credits. She has a strong track record of building valuable community connections and sustaining lasting professional partnerships. We both sincerely hope that this webinar is the first step towards creating a stronger relationship and a better exchange of resources between the Act Early project and the children and families that you serve. Dr. Hall-Lande's contact information is provided at the end of this webinar if you'd like to reach her directly.
Thank you, James, for that nice introduction, and thank you to the audience for joining us today. As James shared, I'm Dr. Jennifer Hall-Lande from the University of Minnesota. I work on several programs here at the university, including the LEND program, which stands for Leadership Education in Neurodevelopmental Disabilities, and the Minnesota Act Early Project. And today I'm going to present to you on the topic of promoting child well-being and healthy development, again, highlighting the Minnesota Act Early Project as well as the many other resources we have to monitor child development, as well as to act early if there are concerns. And as James shared, we have several objectives for the webinar today. To start, we're going to give a basic explanation of early brain development. We're also going to highlight the importance of developmental monitoring during the early childhood years. I'm going to highlight the Minnesota Act Early campaign resources, as well as provide additional free resources and training for those of you who work with young children or who are parents of young children and want to help monitor their child's development. And to start today, a theme that will run through this whole presentation is the importance of early development. We always say it, but I think it's important to establish why. Early childhood, especially those very early years, birth to 3, is a time of tremendous growth and change in a child's brain and development. It's also why it's an important time, if there are concerns, for us to intervene to make sure the child is developing in a healthy way. And so to start us off today, I am going to share a video about the building of a child's brain and early childhood brain development. It's from the Center on the Developing Child from Harvard University. It's a short video, but it does a very nice job of highlighting how early brain development occurs. So I'll play that for you, and then we'll continue sharing.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Thank you. And if you did like that video, you can view it again or view more videos on child development, again, at the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard University. That's just one of many. But to highlight some of what was covered in the video in terms of early brain development, is that during those early years, we talk a lot about neurons. Those are brain cells, and those are the building blocks of a child's brain. Neurons form connections with other neurons to help build the brain based on experiences that the child has. And to talk a little more about early brain development, neurons form in the first months of prenatal development. So before a baby is even born, the neurons are forming and the brain development is very active. During that time, neurons or brain cells migrate to the correct places in the brain through genetic timing and signals. Something I find very interesting is that we're born with about 100 billion neurons, and those are enough brain cells or neurons to learn almost anything. We always say children are sponges for learning. They come into the world ready to learn, ready to gain skills in language and motor skills and social skills. That's what a baby's job is, to learn and to grow. And again, a little more, I like to call this slide beautiful brain wiring because I think it's a very elegant and beautiful process. The experiences in a child's life help build the brain. It helps, and what we mean by that is what you saw in the video, that neurons connect while the baby is experiencing certain things in their world. It helps connect neurons and build the brain. You may have heard the term neurons that fire together, wire together. And I think it's fascinating that each neuron has about 15,000 synaptic connections. So every neuron has on average about 15,000 connections with others. Synapses grow and change as a result of stimulation, and these connections are strengthened through experiences in the child's life. And something that's very fascinating is you keep the brain connections that you need, the synaptic connections, and you let go of the ones that you do not. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So again, early experiences are crucial, and those of you that are children, that are parents to very young children, birth to 5, or who are teachers know how important these early experiences are to child development. Some interesting facts, the majority of neuron connections are made by age 1. So you see that's such a busy time for brain development. And approximately 80% of brain connections or synaptic connections are made by age 3. The brain uses about 60% of the nutritional intake during the first year. And I think that is very interesting. The brain is hungry. It is growing. It's also why things like breast milk and formula are so high in fat, because the brain is hungry and needs a lot of that to form the connections, as well as what we call the myelin sheathing in the brain. After about age 10, the brain growth levels off and pruning begins. We saw that in the video. Connections that are not used are pruned or taken away. And from birth to age 10, the brain is about twice as active as the adult brain. Talked a little bit about this. This is about pruning. You hear use it or lose it, and that definitely applies to brain development. So what is not used in the brain is pruned. What is used develops stronger connections. I have a tree here with a brain because I think it's a nice metaphor here. You may have a tree or a bush in your front yard, and it may be growing in all different directions and get really big. You may then prune the brain, and the bush or the tree, and it becomes healthier. It's more condensed and compacted. It's not going in as many different directions, but it's healthier and more condensed. That has certainly a parallel to brain development. And when a baby or a child isn't using certain connections, those are pruned away. Another way I think of it is maybe a baby takes a class in French or is exposed to French but doesn't continue to use it. Those connections will be pruned away because they're not used. Brain development is also in spurts when the brain is best equipped to learn certain skills. And windows do close for some developmental skills. So there are what we call sensitive or critical periods where a child is most receptive to learning certain things. We think of things like language development or things like social skills. Here's a picture of a brain. There's the human brain at birth on the left side of the screen. You see there's a lot of neurons there, but there's not a lot of synaptic connections. We look at the slide in the middle. 6 years old, look at how many connections are there. So a child is taking in learning and experiences, and those neurons are connecting to all different neurons to help prepare that brain for the environment the child will live in. And the last one is a snip of 14 years old. And right there, we're seeing that pruning has taken place. So some of those connections you see in slide 2 or the middle slide, they really don't need them. The child doesn't need them anymore, so they're pruned away. It's a more efficient brain, faster. And I think that's kind of a nice visual image of the way the brain changes in response to experience. So again, the importance of experience in the early childhood years, the brain and behavioral development are certainly interrelated. So again, the brain is receptive to the experiences that a child has in their environment, and it changes accordingly. It depends on both genetics and the environment, so things like nutrition are important, but also experiences. I think of the importance of early child care, early intervention, early preschool, as well as relationships, some of those key relationships, parent-child, child care provider and child, those all help influence brain development. And the quality of these relationships and early experiences in early childhood has significant impact on how the brain is wired and structured. So as I spoke about before, there certainly are windows of learning, and we call these critical developmental periods, when particular environmental experiences are especially important. These are typically moderate to long periods, but some windows should not be missed as the opportunity to learn can be significantly diminished. I'm going to show you a slide, just a bit on that. One example is language. We say that children are world language learners. Babies come into this world ready to learn a language wherever they're born, be it the United States, be it South America, be it France, anywhere they're born, they come in ready to be receptive to that language and to learn that language. We've all marveled at a child's ability to maybe pick up language in their primary language, but also a second language. It's much earlier for a child. Their brain is much more receptive and what we call malleable than an adult brain is to new languages. That said, as an adult, we can always try and learn, but our brain just isn't as receptive to new language and language structures as we get older. And again, in terms of language, early social and emotional development and physical health provide the foundation upon which cognitive and language skills develop. Language is definitely a key developmental milestone, we all know that, of the early childhood years. Think from birth to 3, how many words and language skills a baby or infant toddler acquires. It's pretty amazing. Their brains are wired to learn language during that age. And children exposed to lots of language interactions develop more neuron connections in the brain area that handles language. And children not involved in lots of verbal interactions have brains that are visibly and measurably less well developed. So language is very important. What we also say about young brains in young children is that they're more plastic or malleable, as I mentioned before. They're more receptive to change and intervention. So delays in the early years may be overcome with later intervention, but the process will be more difficult. So some of the most sensitive windows are those involving emotional, social, and language development. And the young brain, it's a term you hear a lot in early childhood brain development. It has much more neuroplasticity than that of an adult. Here's a quick slide that was developed that talks a little bit about some of these sensitive windows of development. And this is certainly a range, but we look at things like language is on here. When is the brain most receptive to learning language? If you look 3 down, basic vocabulary development from the prenatal to age 3, that is really a critical window for language development. So in homes and in classrooms, we want to see really rich language environments, a lot of bidirectional communication and verbal interaction because it's such a sensitive and important window for language development. Motor development, you see at the top, we go from gross motor development all the way to fine motor skills. And you look, that has a pretty big window in terms of development. Fine motor being things like being able to hold a pencil or being able to string beads. That is a pretty long window. Vision, the brain is looking for a lot of visual input during those prenatal to toddler years. You know, some of these two, again, are just a range, but when it's best to learn, when the brain is most equipped to learn and ready for this input, these are general windows. We look at social attachment down near the bottom as well. We think sometimes of children that have grown up in large or congregate care settings, such as we're seeing less and less of it, but maybe an orphanage, that how there is a window for social attachment. It may be broader than what we have here. For some kids, it may be a more narrow window, but it's very important for a child to get these developmental experiences when the brain is most ready for it. So I hope it's clear. Why intervene early? We intervene early because neural connections, or the brain, is most flexible from birth to age 3. Over time, the brain becomes more resistant to change. So we want to monitor a child's development and make sure they're hitting those developmental milestones within an appropriate range. And if not, we want to intervene early and get them some help and supports that they need to help them gain the skills that they need to meet those developmental milestones. And just a few kind of pieces on the benefits of early intervention. As I've said many times throughout this presentation, but it's such an important point, intervention is more effective and less costly when it's provided earlier in life rather than later. Early intervention targets the developing brain when it's most capable of change. And this foundation, this neural architecture, forms the foundation for future development. And we don't want to miss an opportunity to provide support or help a child attain a developmental skill during those critical times. And just a few of the financial benefits of early intervention. High-quality early intervention programs for infants and toddlers can reduce the incidence of future problems in their learning, behavior, and health status. We say, and this is a rough estimate, but for every investment we have in early intervention, early childhood, society gets back approximately $8. So it's a good value to invest in early childhood programs, to invest in quality childcare, to support families in providing enriching environments for children. I'm sorry, the next one is more of an autism-specific one because I present to a lot of audiences, but I think an important piece to know is that the costs of lifelong supports for children that might have special needs can be cut as much as 2/3 with early diagnosis and appropriate intervention if a child has early developmental delays or developmental needs. So what we promote through Minnesota Act Early Project, as well as Minnesota Help Me Grow, which is the early intervention referral system in Minnesota, is ongoing developmental monitoring. And that's monitoring developmental milestones is an important component of early intervention. So we want to encourage parents and grandparents, child care providers, to really look at a child and monitor their development and make sure they're hitting these developmental milestones so that they're having healthy child development and healthy growth. And considering that parents and child care providers and extended family often know children the best, they're all in a very good position to continually make sure, is our child that we're caring for meeting these developmental milestones. And just to clarify, developmental milestones are considered developmental skills that we all look for as parents or child care providers. These are things like walking, cooing, talking, waving hello. Some of the projects I'm on, such as through CDC, say that children demonstrate milestones in the way they act, in the way they play, learn, talk, behave, interact, and move. So if we're always kind of looking, is the child, are their language milestones on track? Are their play skills on track? We can help support them in the areas that they need to grow and develop in a healthy way. And one of our primary focuses on the Act Early Project is to help parents understand child development. What is typical? What is healthy development? And how can they support their children in this journey of healthy development? We have a lot of resources, and I'm going to share them with you. So some tools to make monitoring easier. This is from the Learn the Signs Act Early Project, which is the national program that's promoting healthy development and monitoring healthy milestones. They provide a wealth of free tools for monitoring the development of children. And this can be in childcare settings, in homes, in preschools. They help parents become partners in monitoring development and help build parent confidence or childcare provider confidence in really knowing what these developmental milestones are. And how can we support the child's healthy development, but at the same time identify concerns earlier and get help more quickly if it's needed. One resource that I think is particularly helpful, the Learn the Signs Act Early Project provides a free training with free continuing education credits. It's online and it's geared towards childcare providers, but certainly parents can watch it as well. And it highlights best practices for monitoring child development. For children, it's focused on children in childcare settings, and it focuses on child developmental milestones, supporting child development, and supporting parent developmental monitoring and acting early if there's concerns. I have a little short video of the Watch Me training, just so you can have a short introduction of what this training is and learn a little more about some of the resources through it. And we'll provide a link for how you can access this at the end. But here it is.
Hi, I'm Carolyn, and I've been a teacher at the ABC Center for almost 10 years. I've taught children of all different ages, but for the last few years, I've taught the 2-year-old class. We teachers spend so much time with our children and really get to know them inside and out. We know which children are good at puzzles and which children love to play dress up. We can tell the difference between crying because of hurt feelings and crying because of a hurt knee. We get to watch how our children grow and change every day. Because we do know our children so well, we're in a great position to know if a child needs to be challenged or when something isn't right. We care about our children, and we all want to help them prepare for the future every way we can. One week at a staff meeting, our center's director showed us some free materials he'd just learned about. There were all kinds of materials to help me track the milestones my children were reaching, and they seemed really easy to use. Well, as soon as the meeting was over, I went online and printed some of those materials. And they actually are easy to use. Now, I keep a close eye on all of my students' milestones and talk to the parents about how their children are doing all the time. It's easy. I feel like I'm a better teacher now because I'm in a much better position to help my students prepare for the future than I was before I started tracking their milestones. And I think the parents trust me more since I've started using these materials. They know that what I'm telling them isn't just my opinion, but I'm basing what I'm telling them on good, credible sources. As you go through this training, I'll pop up now and again to tell you more about my experience with Learn the Signs Act Early. That's the name of the project these materials are from. Hopefully, some of the things I've done will give you some ideas of things you can do.
So thank you for watching that. That was just a brief glimpse into there are many components to that Watch Me training. It's geared primarily towards childcare providers and helping support healthy child development and helping to talk to parents about healthy child development. But certainly I've had feedback from many parents that there are a lot of great resources for them in there as well. In the video, it was mentioned about some of the Act Early, what they call Learn the Signs Act Early materials that help monitor child development. These are free materials, and our local version is the Minnesota Act Early Project, and we provide these materials for free as well. And I just want to provide a cross-section because we have a lot, but some of the ones that have been most useful is we have a Milestone Moments brochure. It's a brochure, and on the inside is a sort of game board, but it shows a child's basic key developmental milestones from age 6 months to 4 years. Many childcare providers have found this a helpful piece to include in conferences, early childhood conferences, as well as many parents have found this to be a useful tool in talking with their pediatrician about healthy development. And certainly, we have plenty of these in the Minnesota Act Early project and are happy to share. We've translated this Milestone Moments brochure on development into many of our local languages, including Somali, Hmong, English, and Spanish. And again, all of these materials are free. We also have a Milestone Moments booklet that goes into more detail about developmental milestones. Again, a nice resource for child care providers in monitoring children in their care's development or talking about child development, and also many parents like this resource for taking to appointments. We have a wonderful book on child development, a storybook that many teachers love sharing with parents or reading in class, and it's called Amazing Me, and it's focused on developmental milestones at age 3. We now also have a book on developmental milestones at age 2 called Where is Bear? And again, it's a wonderful resource for parents and child care providers around a story of development and how to support child development. Another free resource that this program has are Milestones in Action, and these are videos and pictures of what these milestones look like. Things like gestures and motor skills and play skills. A lot of people have liked that prefer a more digital format, on your smartphone or on a tablet. And it's a really great resource. Again, this is on, you can either access this via the Minnesota Act Early website, which I'll share with you later, or the CDC's Learn Signs Act Early. We have many posters that can be put in waiting areas. This is nice for a clinic, but we also have some that are very good for talking about developmental monitoring within child care settings. Here are some resources here for how you can access some of the national materials, but then I'll also give you one for the local Minnesota Act Early. But there's a wealth of free materials and free trainings that you can access to learn more about how to monitor and support child development. And here is our local Minnesota Act Early website. The website is www.ltsae.umn.edu. It's right there on the screen. But we've highlighted a lot of our local activities supporting early childhood development, developmental monitoring, and the importance of early developmental screening. And again, that's also a site that you can order a lot of these free materials and access free trainings. And since we've talked about it a lot today, I would be remiss if I didn't mention a little bit about developmental screening. What screening is a tool to access if a child is doing or learning what they should. It monitors if development is on track compared to same age peers. It can be done by parents or professionals. It's often done in a healthcare setting, or it can be done in a child care setting, but it's seeing if a child's development is on track. Some names you might be familiar with are tools like the Ages and Stages, the Denver Developmental Screening Tool. There's a lot out there, but what it is making sure that a child's development is on track. And again, just an overview of what it is. It's a quick check on the health and development of a child. And I want to highlight, a screening is not a diagnosis. It's not a clinical assessment. It's just something that we ask that all kids, or we highly recommend that all kids partake in, specifically when they go to their pediatrician for child checkups. We also, a lot of school districts advocate the screen at 3. But again, it is not a diagnosis. It's just seeing if a child's development's on track and giving us information of where they are developmentally and how we can support them to reach those developmental milestones. If there are concerns on a screener, then a child is often referred for potential additional assessment. But in itself, it's really provides us a lot of good information. And it tells us, does the child need a more comprehensive evaluation? If it is determined from a screening that a child does, one of our, Minnesota has a wonderful program, the Help Me Grow program. It's Minnesota's early intervention referral system. And families or child care providers can not only get a lot of wonderful resources about development. In addition to Minnesota Act Early, Help Me Grow has wonderful resources on where a child should be at 6 months and 9 months and what are the critical developmental milestones. But it can also help connect families with potential assessment or evaluation services they need if there's a concern. And again, that's the Help Me Grow website. If you Google Minnesota Help Me Grow, you can look at not only how to learn more about child development, but if it's needed to refer a child, what that process is. We're very lucky in our state to have Minnesota Help Me Grow, and it's a resource many families use if there are concerns. So thank you again for taking the time to listen to our presentation about early brain development and the importance of developmental monitoring, as well as learning a little bit about resources that can help support you in helping support children through their developmental journey. And I wanted to thank our collaborators, the Minnesota LEND Project, the Minnesota Act Early Project, and Eastside Neighborhood Services also helps sponsor this webinar. So thank you for listening, and I've included my contact information at the end. You're welcome to email me if you have any further questions, but I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to this webinar today.
Dr. Hall-Lande, thank you so much for being here today and providing such a detailed overview of how the brain develops and how anyone can be an ambassador for ensuring that the children we work with are meeting their developmental milestones. Thank you for taking the time to participate today. Remember to check out the CDC's Act Early site for more learning opportunities and free continuing education credits. It's at www.cdc.gov/actearly. And if you'd like to receive a certificate of 1 contact hour for viewing this information on child well-being and healthy development, please take a moment to fill out a brief survey linked below. Thank you.